Some films were harmed in the making of this podcast. From Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and the palatial FYC studio, you are listening to For Your Consideration,
the podcast featuring roundtable discussions reevaluating the cinematic canon of past masterpieces and modern classics. I'm your host, Dustin Friesenand.
And I'm your host, Mike Josick. And I'd just like to thank everybody for checking out the episode, downloading, streaming, whatever it is you're doing to get us into your ear holes. If you caught our last episode, you might know that it was Dustin's pick this time around, and his choice was a little film by Ben Stiller called Zoolander, which we had long ago promised to do with someone who's been on the show before. At least once. Probably just once. Billy, has it just been once you've been on the show? Was it just Cairo?
It has been once.
Okay. I have another podcast that Billy's been on many times, so they kind of blur. So yeah, we have a guest. We have a guest host this time around. And that guest host is fellow podcaster and friend of the show, Billy Seguire.
Hello, happy to be back. Happy to be watching Zoolander, one of my favorite movies.
And Dustin has no more words of welcome.
I tried to welcome him, and then there was all the shenanigans that happened.
There were some
which
shenanigans.
Are probably going to be cut out, so now I just look like an ass. So thanks for that, Mike. Hi, Billy.
So, as I just said, we are going to be talking about the 2001 Ben Stiller written and directed action comedy film, Zoolander.
AKA the last film in your collection, alphabetically.
And true.
So this was a film that was both a pick of Dustin and a pick of Billy's.
Independently.
Completely independently.
I think you would have asked me, I want to say a year to a year and a half ago, what movie I would pick if I came back.
And while he would have told me, I would have absolutely forgotten.
So, at least two of us were looking forward to watching this film.
Were you not?
I do actually enjoy this movie. I'd only seen it for the first time maybe 3 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago. It was one of those movies that, I mean, I like Ben Stiller movies. There's a number of his films that I've enjoyed. And
save it for the review, buddy.
it just never really made it into the queue, you know what I mean? And there's so many things that I'm behind on and that I want to get to. As Dustin, as my long-suffering cinephile compatriot knows,
I've been trying to get him to watch The Void for the last 20, 30 movies that you've seen ago. 40,
at least,
80.
At least. I prioritize, and it's so based on mood and whatever, and Zoolander just never slotted in there. And then I think I watched it for the first time with an ex-girlfriend, because she was just like, "Oh, you haven't seen this, you have to watch it." And I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. And so when it came around this time, I was like, okay, let's watch it with the critical eye. And yeah.
We'll get to how that went in a moment after we roll the credits.
We've been on hiatus for a little while, and it's our kind of segueing into the conversation has been clumsy. We haven't had a lot of really good beginning of the show
banter.
Chit-chat banter, yeah.
Now it's all just coming out like natural conversation, which is terrible, I hear.
Wait until you get it into the editing process. Then it'll get even better.
I'm not a part of that.
Literally and figuratively. Getting better. Not that Dustin's a part of it, literally and figuratively. Or not a part of it. All right, let's roll the credits.
Splash some of my blood onto the computer to get some voodoo going on.
I'll read the credits out here, and then we can get to the conversation and stop wasting everyone's time. So Zoolander is a film directed by Ben Stiller. It was produced by Scott Rudin, Ben Stiller, and Stuart Kornfeld. Screenplay was by Drake Sather, Ben Stiller, and John Hamburg. Story was by Drake Sather, Ben Stiller. And Ben Stiller. It starred Ben Stiller, Owen Wilson, Will Ferrell, Christine Taylor, Mila Jovovich, Jerry Stiller, and John Voight. Music was by David Arnold. Cinematography was by Barry Patterson. It was edited by Greg Hayden. And it was distributed by Paramount Pictures with a release date of September 28th, 2001.
I did not recognize Mila.
Yeah, she plays
Mila
Katinka.
Jovovich is the one that I always think is somebody else when I watch the movie, but this time specifically, I remembered it was her, and maybe it's because I've recently rewatched all of the Resident Evil movies, but I was keeping her in mind.
Now, this film generally okayly received. At the time of its release, there were those that liked it and didn't like it. It's one of those movies that's kind of had a slow burn, kind of found another life on video, and it's become kind of a cult classic. It's a movie that a lot of people feel is kind of a 100% go-to comedy. Roger Ebert gave the film 1 star. It's got a 64% on Rotten Tomatoes, 61 out of 100 on Metacritic. So generally favorable reviews.
Certainly 2 critics voted for it for the greatest film of all time on the BFI Sight and Sound list, getting it 588th on the critics poll.
And I do think that this film is it has both benefited and been punished for its time. Because I feel like its reviews, pretty much, it's September of 2001. Who doesn't want a goofy comedy that makes fun of New York?
People in rural areas, I hear, statistically.
I didn't really feel that this was a New York movie, though.
I felt it was an international, just fashion world one. The location was irrelevant.
Oh, it's...
in my mind.
It's very New York for me, especially very New York wealth, fashion, the pop industry. And, I think just that... I think it didn't come out at the right time for that. And they did try and downplay those elements.
Oh, you're making a 9/11 thing going here.
Yeah, 100%.
I see what you're saying.
I'm
going to disagree with that.
I'm going to have to disagree as well.
I didn't feel that New York was like a character in the film, and I didn't feel like it was...
It could have been New York, could have been LA, could have been Detroit, Michigan.
It wasn't really portraying the city in any kind of way. It wasn't like deciding, oh, maybe we shouldn't air 24, or maybe we should hold back, this action movie with terrorists, or the frickin' Lone Gunman episode where they fly a plane into a building.
Well, I agree with all of those takes, but my thing is that I think because it was completely produced prior to 9/11 and released right after,
that they might have cut scenes that take place at any
I
familiar
think
place?
just in terms of tone,
I know where he's going with this.
Of tone, it didn't hit in the way that the world was ready to receive it.
It's like when your grandpa dies and somebody in the room makes like
A dead grandpa joke.
a stupid joke, yeah, and you're just kind of like, not the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Too soon,
And
too soon.
This
I
is
get that.
actually, the film had to digitally remove the Twin Towers from the skyline.
It is literally like 2.5 weeks after,
Yeah.
How many people were actually going out to the theater?
And I would totally
tonally-
say that Zoolander, the reason I love it so much is that it completely captures the Y2K millennium aesthetic that died on 9/11.
You're going to have to explain that.
Well, like, if you look at the film, everything about it it's these bold, brash colors. It's so of its time in terms of those Macs, the zip disk joke, the... by nature of it being about the fashion world, it's going to be absolutely dated. Because fashion is something that moves with the times so quickly.
Funny enough, I disagree. The technology was dated, but the fashion, because the fashion world is so obtuse, for most people, honestly, derelict, I could see that coming out. I've seen the odd weird thing like the whole suction cup suit, and it's like, well, high fashion's gonna do whatever the heck high fashion's gonna do. It doesn't seem like it's out of place at all. But when they talk about the super tiny flip phone, it's like that's not the direction phones went in. So that's dated.
Well, I agree, but I mean in terms of... Like, it fits with something that is going to be churning and moving along really quickly with a zeitgeist. So I'm not saying that the actual fashion that they're wearing is dated, but it also is. It's very 2000s. It's very Y2K.
Well, any movie that relies to a certain degree on celebrity cameos.
And this one had way too many celebrity cameos, and that's something I definitely noticed and something that definitely dates.
I do feel that the quantity of cameos wasn't outrageous. I've actually heard the sequel goes like 10 times what this one has.
Yeah, the sequel is an absolute mess.
But when they used celebrities, it was logical.
Yeah, it was to capture the scene.
It was, and they were people of the time.
Trump didn't age quite so well, perhaps.
No.
How dare he be the first cameo in this movie?
I actually, physically recoiled when he showed up on screen.
But, that's what tells you it's New York. Because probably, in order to film somewhere, they were contractually obligated to put him in there.
He has that in every single movie that takes place anywhere he owns.
Exactly.
But I think any movie that has cameos, just to put a button on what I was saying, it's going to be a bit of a time capsule in that regard. As it happens with this film, a lot of the celebrities that they used are celebrities that are still celebrities now. They were very sort of notable or talented people at the time, and I think for the most part still are. You had Cuba Gooding, you had Natalie Portman, you had a couple of fashion designers.
But even if you have somebody who most people won't even recognize anymore, like good old Billy Zane.
Oh my God, sorry. I loved Billy Zane in this movie. He was like my favorite thing. Just need to throw that out there, because I would have completely forgotten it had Dustin not brought it up.
And the fact is...
But there's no issue there. The real thing is that when you have sexual harassment jokes from Ballstein, and then you have Trump in there,
that grope coming or whatever.
Yeah, there's one or
there's
two
stuff
moments.
That's not going to age well.
And I get the kind of character that they were going for with Jerry Stiller, but Jerry Stiller's character has not aged well at all.
Terribly.
Unfortunately,
okay, that's the R word. Guess we're gonna go there.
He hasn't aged well in terms of what we find acceptable, but his character, there's still Maury Ballsteins out there.
Yes.
So, one of the things that I find with Stiller movies, for me, I think Tropic Thunder is kind of like a perfect storm of things that Stiller was sort of doing with his comedy and his films up to that point, where it pushes everything to 12. Mm-hmm. It has everything in it that even at that time shouldn't be in it. But it pulls it off. It walks this razor's edge, and everything from Robert Downey Jr. in blackface to Tom Cruise's character and Ben Stiller's character, pardon the phrasing, going full retard. It's just on the edge, and the intent is such that you don't really hold it against the film, and you know what the film is trying to say, and he's not using it.
It's a parody of reality rather than normalization.
Very much
and
so. I think the parody, what he's parodying here with the fashion world and, the pop world that he's doing here, it's already at such a 12 that it kind of just chugs along completely believably.
But I'm not sure he quite got it right. I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of articulate this, but I sort of feel like
He was never a character that I could even care about, because he's either talking about time to grab some ass, or he's talking about his prostate over and over again, and it's not landing.
I laughed audibly when he was talking on the phone trying to convince his wife to bring the zip drive to the fashion
that was
show.
Good.
Yeah.
That was good. That's his best line for sure.
I think probably what I laughed at most with him, it was less the character of Maury Ballstein and more Jerry Stiller's delivery.
And he has one delivery to my recollection. I
Yes.
can't. Does he have any other deliveries?
I don't think so. But that's actually an interesting thing to say, because for the most part, I liked and found humorous sort of all of these characters, but not consistently.
I mean, that I get, and the movie is nearly 20 years old at this point. Some comedy does not necessarily keep you laughing for that long, but the movie is still definitely funny as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think what I'm just trying to say is that, especially when you're sort of going for this style of comedy, and I can look at Zoolander as Stiller sort of developing and reaching for that thing that I think he achieved in Tropic Thunder. So this was just sort of part of that journey, but...
Wasn't this before Tropic Thunder?
Yes, it was.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. In order for, I think, a lot of these things to land the way I would hope them to land, or I think maybe they should land, it's lacking a level of cleverness. I mean, it almost feels like Fairly humor to me.
I think I disagree with that.
Fruit.
There was stuff in here that was brilliant, like the walk-off. The walk-off was amazing.
The gasoline fight.
Some
is one of the
subtle
best
jokes
scenes.
like you have to get back up on that horse. Well, I'm not a gymnast.
I mean, there's a lot of great, like, I think, I don't know, maybe I'm holding it against the film that it didn't maintain that level.
That level
Momentum?
of cleverness.
Yeah.
Because you'll go from a gymnast pommel horse joke down to my prostate's the size of a watermelon, or trying to just get a couple of drops out
just
there.
Just a draft.
Then over to some ridiculousness where Will Ferrell spits out his coffee on his assistant and they just do those faces back and forth for a little bit. It's like, what's going on here?
But, that's not atypical of Stiller. I mean, to be fair, because...
No, it's not.
When you look at his earlier films, I mean, I remember really enjoying Reality Bites when I first saw it in the theater when it came out, but so many critics, even to this day, like, there's things people like about it, but there's things that people are just sort of like, yeah, he was kind of way off the mark on, this, and this. And same with Cable Guy. I don't know, maybe that's just his thing.
I think Ben Stiller's best jokes and the best parts of Zoolander aren't even necessarily where he's trying to make a joke in the movie, but almost the inside jokes. Like, things that he's had to deal with in his world of pop culture or experienced, and he's just sort of put it on the screen as world building.
Such as?
Like, every fashion ad catalog photo of either Derek Zoolander or Hansel in the movie. Like, just him walking by a Hansel Tommy Hilfiger ad.
By the gas station there, yeah. Yeah, the world building was top-notch.
The ads were great and very believable, except for the whole water one at the end where he's a merman. A merman!
Worth it for the merman. Worth it for both the merman joke and the scene that was reacting to that ad. That ad had to be over the top to trigger the John Voight scene.
100%.
I kind of love the fact that Vince Vaughn is, like, totally without dialogue in this movie.
Yeah. How good of casting is John Voight in that role, though, of a conservative, problematic, abusive father?
Yeah.
It's a role he was born to play.
As soon as you said that, I was going to say, I always have a little bit of trouble watching John Voight, but then you, like, labeled it, and I was like, yeah. Those are my reasons for having problems with John Voight.
But it works completely because of how much it clashes with the rest of the film. The whole coal mining town scene is like, if everything else is a Y2K movie, we're just tripping into a 70s movie for a couple minutes.
I kind of didn't like Hansel at the beginning because he was supposed to be sort of a sub-antagonist, another level of, antagonist for Derek. And I really came to like his character, and I really, really like Owen Wilson's performance of that character. And he's got an arc from beginning to end, and I really appreciate that. And as I was about to say that, I realized I don't feel like Derek Zoolander has a similar arc. And I think that might be my problem, because he always remains this high-concept, kind of flat joke. I mean, people are responding and stuff around him. Pretty much every character in this movie has what I think is sort of an organic
his
character arc.
His girlfriend, not even so much.
I think she has more of a character arc than Derek Zoolander does. Like,
honestly, I don't think they should have ever gotten together at the end. That's so very just sort of shoehorned in there.
I agree. I thought that was... I mean, I love the joke where he's saying, I saw her
sandwiched between those two Finnish dwarves and the
Maori
warrior tribesmen.
And I thought to myself, I could spend the rest of my life with that woman.
Was the tea drugged? Because if the tea was drugged, then that scene becomes problematic.
I think it was...
It wasn't. She definitely said it was a strong tea.
It was a strong tea, yes.
Yeah, I've always had issue with that. It's like, wait a second, something's off here.
Like a joke like that, it's kind of off, but it's also funny, and that's one of those jokes that I think walks that line and just hits properly, and kind of everything in the environment and everything in the writing and everything in the acting.
Well, that was the
it's just
scene,
working to make that joke land.
That scene was also needed to shift character relationships for everything past that scene. You needed to make sure that they had gelled, and like, what better way to make characters gel than an orgy?
I did like their broing up before, where it's like they're 6-year-old kids. Well, you were kind of hurting my feelings or whatever.
I was whack.
No, man, I was whack.
And that's where I really turned with Hansel, too. That's where I really started liking the character. And
because you could believe him as a pseudo-rival / big fan.
And enjoying him far more than Zoolander. Like, well, it's in the computer.
I do think that probably boils down to, at least in this time period, I think Owen Wilson was a better actor than Ben Stiller.
I think Ben Stiller was really focused on just maintaining the one look, like, as much as he could all the time.
Well, because I don't know if either of you watched on DVD or saw the special features, but this was a character that Ben Stiller had previously played in like VH1 Fashion Awards skits in 96 and 97.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so the genesis of this movie is almost like
basically an SNL character
exactly.
made into a movie.
Yes, it's like a Night at the Roxbury or any of those movies. The Blues Brothers.
It's Pat.
Hey. When you bring up the Blues Brothers.
I'm just saying it shares that genesis. And maybe if he is too in character and too stagnant, that's the reason why, because it was built around this concept of character.
That's fair. And honestly, I'm not a big Will Ferrell fan, and he was the thing I was sort of almost least looking forward to re-experiencing, because I just thought he's playing like the big bad, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm not buying into the big bad, but I really dug Mugatu. Like,
I love Will Ferrell as Mugatu in this movie.
Especially at the end. Like, at the end, where he flips out and he's like, he's only got one look. It's one look. Why does everybody... Le Tigre, Blue... There's no other look.
I feel like I'm on crazy pills here.
Yeah, like that... It was this weird cathartic moment for me.
It called out like everything you probably had against the character.
Yeah, then. Exactly.
And that I really, really love about Will Ferrell, his capability. Because the role of Mugatu was actually written for Andy Dick. And the thing that Will Ferrell can do that Andy Dick cannot is taking the character...
Stay sober?
Yes. Yeah, but in character, too. To go down to a grounded moment. And become the straight man. For instance, when Zoolander knocks over the school for ants, Will Ferrell as Mugatu has this moment of just, but no, it's gonna be like a real moment of just shock and confusion, that he understands how to play a heightened character like that with those grounded moments.
I should qualify, I dislike Will Ferrell's comedy. I actually quite enjoy Will Ferrell's dramatic acting, much in the same way that I can't stand Adam Sandler's comedy. But I mean, I love Punch Drunk Love and Spanglish. Like, Sandler's got dramatic chops.
He's a great actor. I think Will Ferrell is great as long as you keep him away from John C. Reilly. Those two are a bad influence on each other.
I like Step Brothers. I'm going to say it here on record.
And, you know, I can totally see Andy Dick in that role. It would be a very different...
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting to think about that, because I almost wonder if that would have me forgive some things in the movie more if both the protagonist and the antagonist were both so hyperbolically ridiculous.
I don't think so. I think it's needed that Derek Zoolander has a straight man to oppose him in brief flashes.
The thing is, even Zoolander can be a straight man at points for that flicker of a moment. Just, he's always an idiot.
I disagree. I think Stiller will tone down Zoolander. Mm-hmm. He will show not just, I'm really, really, really ridiculously good looking. He'll say something sad like, I'm not I'm not an ambi-turner. An ambi-turner, yeah. And, you know, he's trying to emote or show some pathos or, you know, show this tragic side of himself, emotionality, whatever. But it's still... Like, I think that's what was different about Hansel, is that when you got beyond the conflict, when you got beyond the competition between the two of them, Hansel just warmed up so
Hansel's
completely.
A real person.
And he's a real person, yeah.
Telling his story about how he went hiking on the mountain, but it turned out it was just a peyote trip.
He fell off the side of Mount Vesuvius.
Yeah, and he's so warm and welcoming.
And I'm not even like a huge Owen Wilson fan, but I just wanted to like hang out with them after watching this.
Eat some of that big ass bread he just baked.
I love the little community that he's built up around him.
Whereas Zoolander's just him and the other three guys who all die right at the beginning.
Although I like that, and I think, you know, circling back, that's one of the things that didn't hit right about the movie, because it's like, hey, what's the solution to all of life's problems? Orange mocha frappuccinos! And that's sort of like the point of the movie.
Yeah, I can... Nice how you tied that together, Billy. I see Billy's thesis.
Orange mocha frappuccinos?
And then it ends in fire.
It's such...
Burn it all down.
An amazing, stupid scene with Wake Me Up Before You Go playing and water fight turning into a gasoline fight.
I actually really liked the soundtrack in this one.
I did too, yeah.
It played very nicely. It was never jarring, and it always suited it pretty well.
It was kind of like the timeless retro. It's the stuff that when you hear it, you don't just go like, "Oh my god."
It remade Relax into a thing.
About 4 different times. And actually, Farrell making that stupid hypnotizing video,
the Clockwork Orange moment,
that was actually really good.
It was really good.
It's so dumb it's good again. It manages to go that exact amount around that circle of stupidity.
Pay attention to the dog. Or listen to the dog or something like that.
And just him dancing around, walking around, his face repeating. It was perfect.
Now, one of the things this movie was criticized for early on, I said Roger Ebert gave it 1 star. Apparently, according to Wikipedia, I did not go to read the original review, I think he was kind of hard on it for its simplification and turning child labor into comedy.
Okay.
And thought that was a little off color. And I don't know what it says about me that I didn't feel that way.
Well, I mean, I think because it was the bad guys wanted child labor to be a thing. Like, that was part of the bad plan.
It was, but I can see how, like, making a comedy about human trafficking or making a comedy about abortion, like, even if the comedy is against it, it's still kind of like, really?
Yeah, I don't think it lingered on that enough to be an issue, even.
I agree.
You know, to unfortunately, to bring up the sequel, one of the things I hated about Zoolander 2 is that it really seemed to linger on, like, the wider fascia community's plan and who they were under, like, the shadowy robes. This movie had one scene at the beginning of shadowed faces to lay it out, to say, here's your conflict, go. And it nicely ran with it without really needing to come back into the icky fingers of it all.
Here's a question for you two. Do you think one of the things that sort of surprised me, even though I'd seen this movie a few years ago, the way it starts immediately with the greater fashion consortium or cabal or whatever, totally laying out the plot in the first, like, 5 minutes of the movie. Do you think having such a heavy-handed sort of plot, where it was an assassination of a, foreign leader, and did the movie need that? Could it have gone for something a little bit more just along the lines of parody and found kind of a more simple narrative to follow rather than turn it into a freaking MacGyver episode?
So to respond to Mike's question, I don't think... I'm one of those people who will joke about anything at any time. The whole too soon thing? No. Joking is sort of how I get over stuff. So
I don't mean it in
fine.
the sense of, was it appropriate to have that? I just mean...
Yeah, that's covering sort of Ebert's qualm before, and then going to, does it need the big thing? If you're going as ridiculous and turned up to 11 as this film is,
Yes.
Why not?
I think specifically because of the world they're exploring, they really wanted to highlight how vapid and empty and surface level all of that was. So to have a really heavy set of stakes in there, like almost like a James Bond plot hanging in terms of stakes, it emphasizes what you want to emphasize and also lets the film churn.
If anything, I would complain that the two assassinations that David Duchovny's character gives are both American. Like, had they done two things that weren't just presidents, they start talking about, like, a banana republic here, you talk about South African country
Dustin,
here.
Is the American audience going to know any of those?
Franz Ferdinand. You could at least get Franz Ferdinand.
I have to say, Abraham Lincoln was perfect because they were able to make the actor/model joke.
Yes.
Like that, I loved that because they had already kind of set it up with Fabio.
And I did like how the reporter sort of called it when they mentioned Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the two guys behind the grassy knoll, they sure as hell were.
And how perfect was it to get David Duchovny as the conspiracy guy?
Oh, it was absolutely glorious. He was Mulder, 100%.
It's perfect casting.
Duchovny was also in that same sort of position as Mugatu, where because he was not a face and body guy, because he was the hand model, he had that perspective. He had that real world grounding to him.
He was a straight man.
So
we're cut from a different cloth than the face and body guys.
So he's astonished at how ridiculously stupid Derek Zoolander is.
Well, that moment where he's like, for the second time, but why male models? Are you kidding me?
And he's like, really?
Yeah. And that was an improv.
Was it?
Yeah, that wasn't in the script, but I think Ben Stiller just asked it again, and that was David Duchovny's reaction, staying in character.
I will say, you've actually improved the film for me somewhat, just with some of these behind-the-scenes things.
I'm surprised. You're usually the behind-the-scenes guy. I'm surprised you didn't go to these.
Well, like I said, this movie has been on my radar, but it's been, on the outer rim. Like, it's not something that's been a focal point of stuff that I've been seeking out. I'm not even sure if I have a copy of this movie, like, in my collection. I might. But, yeah, it just, the curiosity wasn't there. I need to have a little bit of that curiosity, or the fact that I enjoyed it for what it is, and was like, yeah, that was a really fun comedy. I may revisit that at some time. It wasn't like, there's something...
It's not a Mike deep dive kind of movie.
If there's something terribly wrong with it and I don't understand why there's something wrong with it, that's when I really start to dig. Or when I love it so much that I just want to know everything about it, that's the other time I start to dig. So to have something that I really enjoy but is just kind of there, that's probably why I haven't... And also, I mean, we watched this movie, like, yesterday.
Right.
And I've been at work all day, so there hasn't been a lot of time to... I did try to do like a little bit of a internet scouring to sort of see what's out there, but I mean, I had my own opinions of the movie, and I knew that we were going to be able to talk about it, so I wasn't going to have to like
fill the void,
throw stuff out there. I'm glad you brought some stuff to the table.
We were going to trust in you this time.
Oh, I appreciate it. I would also highly recommend. So I watched it on DVD. It is my special collector's edition widescreen collection. So it's one of the special Paramount widescreen DVDs.
Back when widescreen was listed as one of the special features.
Yes. And you put it in, and over the menu is Ben Stiller as Derek Zoolander explaining to you the DVD menu. So like, here is play. Here are special features. This is the setup. And that feels very 2001 to me, very early DVD.
I agree. Like the animated menus, the interactive menus, just...
Interactive
they don't really
menus
exist
is
anymore.
actually listed as a special feature.
You actually have me curious enough. I mean, like I said, I do enjoy the movie. I'm curious enough now. I probably will listen to the commentary. It's... like, the Tropic Thunder commentary is technically part of the film, because there's a scene in the movie where Robert Downey Jr., they're like, when do you break character? And he says... when the commentary's done. And he does the entire commentary as that character.
God.
And when at the end of the commentary, when they're like, well, that's it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I've been Ben Stiller, and I've been Jack Black. And he's like, and this has been Robert Downey Jr. And I'm like, brilliant. But, yeah. But that is also entirely irrelevant insofar as how we are all going to fall in judgment on this film.
If I can just ask you one more thing before the judgment. What did you guys think about the visual look of the film?
I liked it. I mean, the movie... the thing that I like the least about the movie is Derek Zoolander. I thought the production design was great. I thought the music was great. I thought, the world building, like you said, the advertisements, the use of real world publications, things like that. Like, they weren't done in a way where you could tell that somebody like made a deal with CNN to have CNN people come in and make it like, oh, this is really happening. It just felt...
well, it was like co-produced by VH1.
Yes, it was.
So a lot of the like the VH Fashion Awards and the B-roll, I think, came from them.
But a lot of the...
it felt natural, not shoehorned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how the look of this film, of how it is so bright and colorful and Y2K, and also just a little bit flat. Like, everything looks like it is framed as it would be for a catalog shoot.
I agree.
Not that half the shots weren't done very specifically for that. Ben Stiller in the mines there, hitting the rocks a couple of times with the pickaxe.
I think I got the black lung. Yeah, I think for the most part, I mean, like I said, I did enjoy this movie, so I don't really have a problem with the sum of its parts, I guess, for lack of a better word. I'm guessing Dustin's more or less in the same boat.
Pretty much. Like, I just call the shots and everything clean. It felt very clean to me.
Okay. Well, good.
Okay.
All right, who's going to call this sucker?
If nobody has any objections, I believe I might be of service. Now, this will be a straight walk-off. Old school rules. First model walks, second model duplicates, then elaborates. Okay, boys, let's go to work.
H before beauty code, jeez.
Whatever.
So we will go on to the judgment portion, and I think Billy's up. Billy gets to start it off.
Billy's the guest.
Okay, do you just want
And Billy's
to...
the one we all already know when we started.
Yeah, I'm gonna call this one a masterpiece. I think it I love time capsule movies. I think this one both does it and holds up in a way that the way it parodies the culture is still working. It's still really funny. I love Will Ferrell as Mugatu. I love everyone in this movie. So apart from a couple things as we talked about with Maury Ballstein that is like, okay, that hasn't aged too well, but you could probably also argue it was a bit out of date at the time as well. So yeah, I'm going masterpiece.
And Dustin?
No, I think we should go with the other more obvious option, which was Mike.
Okay, all right. Dustin wants to play the wild card.
I do.
Yeah, I'm going to go museum piece. I kind of felt like I wasn't going to go masterpiece with it going into it. And I enjoyed it just as much as I did the last time I saw it. It's an entertaining movie. It's got a lot of great jokes. It's got some middling to fair jokes. I was even kind of okay with some of the over-the-top stuff, like the balls models and names like Maury Ballstein and those things which are just sort of like, I think mostly just, like I said before, not being able to really connect with the main character and kind of caring more about side characters and not having that arc. It wasn't enough to push this from a museum piece to a masterpiece. Incredibly well-crafted movie, pretty clever, pretty funny, but like a lot of filmmakers before Stiller and that we've covered before on this show, there's movies where I've been like, I know that these guys, these people, let's be non-gender specific, I know that these folks have better films in them, and I mean, for crying out loud, I think I said, like Memento was not a masterpiece because if we cover like some of his later stuff, like that's where the masterpiece is. Or I know there's one more filmmaker, but I can't quite think of it. I think Stiller's masterpiece is after this movie.
Which, I'm just curious, what movie would you say is his masterpiece?
Tropic Thunder.
Okay.
I feel like Tropic Thunder is the apotheosis.
I would still probably go to Zoolander before Tropic Thunder, but it's personal taste.
It's cage match taste. That's what I'm hearing here. Get you two to fight it out.
Well, it's the same kind of thing with Wes Anderson. Like, there's movies that I really enjoy from his earlier career, which, some people will fight you to the death for, but what I consider his masterpiece is I'm sure not what other people would consider his masterpiece. And actually, most people consider Grand Budapest Hotel his masterpiece, and I kind of feel that's more of a greatest hits than anything else.
Yeah, to me, that's a bit past peak. But we have one more person who needs to give their verdict on Zoolander.
Dun, dun, dun. And coming in, actually, I was starting off with Masterpiece as my vote. However, as I was watching the film, I was finding a lot of stuff falling flat, a lot of stuff feeling rather dated. The sheer amount of celebrity cameos, I feel that doesn't tend to age well.
I'm surprised that is something that you oppose, but...
Well, I find when it comes to a lot of celebrity cameos, there's a way of doing it where, oh, hey, look, it's the celebrity. There's a celebrity. We're supposed to care. But then there's celebrity cameos where it doesn't matter who they are. They're there. They're doing a thing. Here, Billy Zane was doing a thing. Mm-hmm. Where it doesn't matter who Billy Zane is. You can actually get a character off of him, whereas with other actors, you actually have to know who they are and have opinions of them coming in.
I think Billy Zane had more of a character arc than Derek Zoolander.
Exactly.
I mean, I do think, overall, top celebrity cameo in this, if not Billy Zane, it's definitely Gary Shandling. But also, I mean, that...
I feel like Shandling and Duchovny, there's something... Because those two, like, love each other, and they keep appearing in things together, and... So when I saw one, and I knew the other was there, it just seemed like some sort of yin-yang thing happening.
But then also a bunch of dumb lowbrow jokes. You have half the people who don't have a character arc. It's not as strong as it could be. And I'm seeing too many holes to really put it up in masterpiece place. Once again, like Mike, it's a film that I really enjoy, and it's one that I laugh at a whole heck of a lot, but I don't think it's aging well enough to really be masterpiece material. And I so want there to be more comedies on our masterpiece material, but comedy is so hard to age well.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of what you're saying. I think of it as a museum piece. It's a museum that I really enjoy going to.
I'm curious, Billy, how old were you when you saw this for the first time?
I probably saw it I didn't go to theaters. I saw it on TV, but...
Because a lot of times when you hit that sweet spot...
Yeah, I mean, I would have been 13 when this film released. And that probably says
which
a
is
lot.
kind of a sweet spot.
Yeah.
God, we're old.
Well, I mean, I saw this movie
Don't
when
worry,
I was...
I talked to somebody at work who talked about watching the Marvel movies growing up, and I just aged in front of their eyes. And I'm like, you mean like Blade, right? Like Blade? They didn't mean Blade.
You mean like the original Roger Corman's
Fantastic
Four? Is that what we're talking about?
So, yeah. Does Dustin have anything else he wants to...
It's so hard to get a comedy on here.
It is. I think comedy is one of the hardest genres. People compare it so much to horror because it's all about setting up and paying off, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it's easier to make someone scream than it is to make someone laugh.
100%.
A lot of humor is very cultural and is very time and place. Whereas horror, you still have the primal fears that you can really dig into. How you do horror is very time. Like you look at, I still really want to do a 3-movie comparison of all the stuff based off of I Am Legend, because you can look at those as being perfectly representative of the era that they were done in, all from the same source material. Even then, you can set up horror a lot more easily than you can set up comedy for a long-lasting effect.
And a lot of comedy is reliant on the time that it's made in. Some of it does transcend. Some of it does, just hit that sweet spot. Not just for someone's nostalgia, but like culturally.
Like I know Monty Python's Life of Brian is on the list, and I want to see how that fares, because I haven't seen anything Monty Python in about 15 years.
Yeah. But like we're both kind of dreading watching Animal House.
Yeah, there are certain movies where like to go back to is hard.
Because we're thinking of a movie that was made in the early 80s about Greek culture.
And I mean, I hate frat everything to begin with, so it's coming in at a wrong spot for me.
And I've had this movie like on my list for a long time. I think I maybe saw it when I was like super like preteens or whatever, but I don't remember a lot of it, so I've always wanted to revisit it, and it's like, is it going to survive post Me Too? I don't think so.
I'm just wondering if I'm going to vote it off the island. That's my real question. Is it good enough to make museum piece is the real question for me.
Well, and I think the comedies that probably age the worst are the ones that are like, well, you got to push the line. You got to go right up to it to get people to have a reaction, where the comedies that age best are more absurd.
Are the ones that rely on cleverness?
Yeah, or just
anything?
Pure absurdism. To just be like, what?
Yeah, I think I'd 100% agree with that.
Absurd can age well. Clever ages well. But if you're talking about, pushing the line, then all of a sudden the joke is just that you pushed the line. You said Balls on TV. His name was Ballstein.
Exactly.
I get it.
Or like so balls. Many comedies where you're looking at it and being like, oh, I forgot that you were super transphobic. Like,
We just watched our last episode was on Dawn of the Dead, and like Dawn of the Dead was one of the video nasties, you know, like it was. Night of the Living Dead was considered kind of extreme for what it was, and Dawn of the Dead was, you know, taking it even higher. We spoke about Roger Ebert's reviews earlier. He said this was like a super violent, super gory kind of mess of a movie, but he thought he was brilliant. And then the Day of the Dead, he's like, well, this is just disgusting. Yeah. It's perversion. It's whatever, right? And it's like you watch those movies now, and
like I saw Rampage yesterday, and there were people who were eviscerated. There was a torso torn in half. And it's not like it was implied. No, you saw it. And I was like, oh, I didn't know this movie was R-rated until the Rock censors himself by cutting himself off. And I'm like, you're not R-rated. You're PG-13. My God, has violence changed in cinema?
Have either of you seen the documentary, This Film Was Not Yet Rated?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that film is fantastic and everyone should see it.
Highly agree.
I wonder if it's on the list.
If not, it should be. That's probably the best documentary I've seen in a long, long time.
It's so great in just delineating how random
Yes.
the whole MPAA rating system is. Like, it's literally just based on who's in the room, what mood they're in. Again, going back to Dawn of the Dead, they were told that they were either going to be X-rated or unrated because of the blood and gore and whatever. And they had taken a couple of jokes out, some things that had humor, and their first submitted cut, I guess, was a little dark. Mm-hmm. And after that, you know, the MPAA sending it back to them, they inserted a couple of those scenes back in, and they were suddenly okay with it and gave it an R because it had some humor. And the humor leavened the gore and the horror. So it just literally, if the person in the room or the people in the room were like, no, I'm okay with this, then your movie gets an R rating.
Well, I can't remember exactly which filmmaker it was, but I know there was at least one film that resubmitted an unchanged cut and got the rating they wanted.
That might have been South Park. Actually, no, I think South Park, I think Matt and Trey,
they specifically
always
put
go
stuff
worse.
in. Exactly. They put in stuff they know is going to be cut and just see what they can get away with, which I appreciate. But at the same time, that tells you things that are wrong with the system.
They get told South Park goes to hell, you can't have that title, so they call it Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. And they're like, okay. Yeah.
But that's kind of moving away from the current film, which is Zoolander.
Zoolander.
Yes.
Zoolander.
So that is one masterpiece and two... Did you give a museum piece, Dustin?
I gave a museum.
Okay, that's one masterpiece and two museum pieces for Zoolander. We'd like to know what you guys think. Give us your thoughts on our YouTube comment wall, or hit us up on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just search for Your Consideration or at FYC Show. You're bound to run into us somewhere. Billy, you have some podcasts and internet social media presence.
Yes, I do.
Would you like to pimp some of that now?
Yeah, definitely check me out. My main podcast is Scooby-Doos or Scooby-Don'ts. That's where my girlfriend Amelia and I watch every episode of Scooby-Doo in chronological order. Rounding up on episode 400 of that pretty soon. And
They do it twice a week, man.
if you'd like to check out... if you go to my Twitter, at @thebillyseguire, you'll see most of my other projects there. I do have my film podcast has been on hiatus for a little while lately.
That makes two of us.
Yes, I knew that. And yeah, I do have another project, but I'll probably ask to come on a little closer to when that's happening to talk about that.
Sounds like you've got another film in mind, possibly.
Not necessarily. It's more that just I have a project where I'll actually want to advertise things.
Great, so everybody can go check out Billy. I actually have a guest hosting thing on your film spotting podcast.
You do. You were on an episode.
Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
Exactly.
I felt that I
Cheated on me with another film podcast.
conducted myself well in somebody else's podcasting pond. But yeah, feel free to go check that out. We can put some links up in the show notes for anybody that's curious. And that's pretty much it for us.
Next time, we'll be showing Mike's choice before the big 100th episode, and that movie is...
Sherlock Jr., which is a 1924 Buster Keaton film.
Oh.
I've been looking forward to doing some Buster Keaton, and...
It's a big shift from Zoolander.
And we'll see if it fares any better than the other Sherlock film we did.
It has nothing to do with Sherlock Holmes. It has a detective element to it, which I believe is why Sherlock Jr. is in there.
Right. I remember now
Yes.
your description of it to me. Luckily, this will be cut and then reinserted as a stinger to make me look like an idiot.
And then for our 100th episode, we've kind of talked about this before. The movie that most people would probably go to first, we're going to go to for our centennial, and that is the Orson Welles classic, Citizen Kane.
Ooh, very interesting.
And then I'm sure we're going to run out of steam and go on hiatus again.
We'll see how it goes, because we shot on the current number one, Vertigo, so we're still getting crap for that one.
I do want to revisit Vertigo. There's, you know what? Out of all the movies we've done, we never did our anniversary show, so we never really got to talk about kind of our time doing this.
Next year.
But Gone with the Wind, Vertigo, and Duck Soup. Those are three movies that just linger in the back of my mind, and it's like, should I reevaluate those?
Well,
only time will tell.
If there's any
I
point
have
in
better
time...
things to do with 4 hours of my time.
I was going to say, if there's any point in
Gone
time
with
where you're
the
going to be
Wind.
home for 4 hours without anywhere else to go, this might be the only point in history where watching Gone with the Wind is worth it.
So be sure to catch us when we're back with Sherlock Jr. And Billy, thank you again for joining us for our conversation on Zoolander.
You're very welcome. Had a great time.
And we'll find a way to have you come back again, unless we get a whole bunch of messages saying keep that Billy Seguire away from the podcast.
Or if this is the last
see when
episode you release until then.
That's right.
We will see you when we invite you back to watch Electrocuting an Elephant. A nice short episode.
So again, thank you everybody for streaming or downloading, listening. Like, share, follow, subscribe to all of the things. Support the show in whatever way you can. We thank you for it wholeheartedly.
And we will see you next time. I've been your host, Dustin Friesenham.
And I've been your host, Mike Josick.
And I've been your guest, Billy Seguire.
And this has been For Your Consideration.
Ta-ta.
Peace.
Skies, running my hands over my eyes. When I fell out of bed, hurting my head from the things that I said.
And you remember the format of the show, Bill? Really?
Yes, and I just listened to your Old Boys episode, so I'll let you two lead,
All right.
But I am here and familiar.
Basically, you speak when spoken to.
And because you've done podcasting with me before, you know I'll still cut in.